Welcome, 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 everyone, to another episode of the Aligned as Fuck podcast. I am your host, Candy Barone, and I have to say, I'm super excited to share my guest with you. I had the opportunity to meet Jessica, I don't know, God, it's probably been 2 or 3 years ago now,
Yeah.
where I was on her podcast with another individual who runs the Dames, and I've talked about that. But I'm excited because Jessica is someone I've always admired, and I'm really thrilled to have her here and get into one of those raw, real, gritty conversations that we have. As you know, this is our space to go deep. It's our space to take the rabbit hole dumps. All things are fair game, and we never know where these conversations are going to go because it's all about being in the moment and being present. And so, with that, let me just welcome Jessica Fearnley to the show. Welcome, Jessica. I'm so excited to have you here.
Thank you, Candy. I really respect you too. And I think I basically have no filter. So I'm really looking forward to whatever we're going to talk about today.
Yay, we're all about no filters for sure. Before we get started, let me tell you a little bit about this brilliant human. I am so blessed to be in her presence today. Jessica Fearnley is a business coach who helps women build seven-figure consulting firms. She specializes in transition from 6 to 7 figures in turnover and is an advocate for earning more by working less. Woohoo! Like, seriously, who doesn't want to earn more and work less? We're done with the busy. Jessica has a bachelor's and master's degree from Nottingham University and a career background in project management, business planning, and business development in both the public and private sectors. In December 2019, she was named one of LinkedIn's top voices for entrepreneurship and small business and is passionate about closing the gender pay gap for women in consulting. Yay.
Yay.
And I also want to highlight because she didn't put it in her bio, and I want y'all to know because we're going to talk about it some. She also has a brand new book, which I
Yay.
love the title because the title is Too Much. It is how to thrive being more instead of settling for less. And so, Jess, welcome again to the show. It's awesome to have you here.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm so excited. And thank you for mentioning the book because I don't know how we didn't mention that in the bio.
Yeah, I mean, because I seriously, let's talk about that. The title alone is kind of the place I want to go for you because it's one of the things I think that creates such a resonance for me in who you are and how you show up. It is this conversation around too much. And I
Yeah.
know for me personally, especially being a very highly energetic 6-2 manifesting generator, too much has been like the mantra of my life in all capacities. And I love because a meme changed my life probably about 6 months ago that was like, if you think I'm too much, go find less. And so I
Yes.
want to dig in a little bit and talk about this concept of too much and how that sort of became this flagship message in all of what you do. What got you to, let's kind of talk about what got you here and what's really living in that space.
Yeah. So for me, kind of researching and writing my book has been like a 2 year project. And we launched the book in February. So it'd been something that, probably since I was about 5 years old. I was that kid. I just used to write pages and pages of like creative writing. I was writing stories. I always thought I was going to be an author. Um, but coming into my business, I was like, yeah, I definitely want to write a book at some stage, but I want to write the right book at the right time, not just some like stupid, like, you know, empty business book that is boring to read and contributes very little. I wanted to wait until there was this big sort of moment of like, this is what I should write about. So I actually can't remember the point at which the too much theme came to me because it wasn't on the table when I was first researching the book. But it was something that was circulating. I love the meme that you referenced. I referenced the same one in the book because that's the thing. I kept talking to women and hearing them be like, yeah, I mean, I'm way too much. And that would always make me laugh because I have been too much since birth. I'm exactly the same. I am so far too much. It's actually crazy. And I think a theme that I really noticed that really resonated for me as I was talking to more and more women about this kind of, do you feel like too much? What does that look like? What has it been like? is that yes, we were very aware of it very early in life. And early life had been sort of, particularly the teenage years and in our 20s, it's like tone it down, go slower, don't upset people, all of those things. But actually, as we have come into entrepreneurship, you realize that being too much is actually the best thing that it's possible to be. It's your biggest source of USP actually in a business. And we have this largely untapped, unfulfilled, unrealized source of power and energy that has been there for us our entire lives. But it's almost like, and this is absolutely true for me, I think until I came into my business, I didn't really know what it was for and I didn't know how to use it. And it felt like it was a hindrance more than it was a blessing. But since finding myself in my business, and I think I think this is probably something that everyone finds, but when you come into business, it sets up this personal growth pathway that, like, the more you surrender to it, the more you submit to it, the more you do the hard work, face the hard things, the hard emotions, the hard things that come up to be processed and released. It's just been something that is like, oh, this is why I'm too much. And so it was a very interesting journey. And absolutely, since the book came out, I've had messages from women I haven't even met just being like, oh my gosh, your book has like really is told the story of my life, which is so gratifying because it's always a little bit of a risk with a book. You have to commit to the entire thing in writing before anyone really sees it in its full state. So it's been really, really deeply meaningful for me to know that it resonates for women out there in the world.
I love that so much. And I remember when I wrote my book, it was the same thing. I had people from across the world. Oh, wow. It feels like, and my clients would be like, it feels like I have you in my pocket. I'm like, that's weird. And it's also, I can appreciate that. Right. And I think about this idea of too much. I love the way you say that. And I want to come back to a couple of the things that you said in your response. But that idea of, I think, especially as women, we have been so overly conditioned that our too much is some sort of weakness, and somehow we've got to tone it down, dial it down. I hate that phrase so much. Dial it
Mm,
down. And what I've learned and what I know in my coaching is that two-ness is all of your magic. It is all of your superpowers, right? And you
yeah,
term, and I want you to define it a little bit more. You said USP. And I want to talk
yeah,
a little bit about what USP is and how tapping into that two-ness activates that versus what we've been taught to do, which actually diminishes it, right?
yeah, yeah. So USP, unique selling proposition, it's like this sort of marketing branding thing that means why are you different, what differentiates you from everyone else who's doing what you do. And what I've noticed, actually, I find this very funny, but like women tend to firstly be like, oh my gosh, nothing makes me unique, I'm exactly the same as everyone else, what am I going to do? And then we kind of tap into like, okay, but like, look at you, look at all, like you said, all the twos, like too loud, too clever, too quick, too whatever. Like when we really tap into that, you start to get a sense of like, okay, this is how I'm different. So for me, one of my big things is I am too emotional, I'm too sensitive. But the superpower that has been the entire time is that I'm deeply empathic.
Mhm.
So I feel other people's emotions in the moment. Often there is like an unspoken thing when I meet my clients and they're like, you are my coach. And I'm like, I don't know what your story is, but I feel it. So
Mhm.
yes, I am your coach. Let's do this. But I think that the thing that people tend to get to is then when you're really able to stand in what makes you unique, then people start saying, oh, but I'm so different to everyone else, like no one wants this, like the market isn't moving in this direction. It's like you can't have it both ways.
Right? Well, it's kind of like the dichotomy, I think, that is the human experience, right? I feel
Yeah,
like most of us, unless you're a narcissist, that's a different conversation. But most of us have this deep, deep desire that we want someone to really, really, really see us and really value what we bring to the
yeah,
table. And then on the same breath, we have this fear that, oh my God, I don't want anyone to really, 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 really see me because somehow they're going to see that I'm flawed and I'm broken and I'm not enough. Because I also think
yes,
there's this interesting teeter-totter, and I'd love to explore that with you a little bit, that I feel for a lot of women who especially have been told they're too much, there's also a very direct correlation to not to feeling not enough. And there's
Yes.
like this almost like this challenge where we think it's either or, and I actually think it's both. I think we reside in both. It's like having two thoughts, two different thoughts, two disparate thoughts at the same time. I
Yeah.
feel like part of, and I'd be curious on your take on this, is part of the work around helping people understand that they can feel both in the moment and in their own personal life journey, and they're actually one and the same and not as disparate or different as women would like to think.
Yeah, well, I really think that the like too much, not enough, it's two sides of the same coin. And often it's complete dichotomy. Like we make it into an all or nothing. Like I'm either too much. And one of the things that I talk about in the book, and I think it's really important, is for us to notice all of the times when we take something external, like the environment that we're in, the people who are also in the room with us, and we internalize it and we say, this room is fine. I'm the problem. I'm too much. So a big driving force in the book is like, look, if you're too much, could it be that you're putting yourself in the wrong places? And one of the themes in the book is this trauma backstory that a lot of us have. And, you know, whether it's big T trauma or little T trauma, a lot of my clients are affected by either one of those. And a really big thing that can happen when we have been affected by trauma is that we put ourselves in the wrong places because we are still acting out the pattern of that trauma. So then it becomes this like self-perpetuating thing, like, look at all the evidence around me, people don't respect me, clients don't treat me very well, like no one takes me seriously. And so we don't realize that it's because we are putting ourselves in the wrong places. But then I think this relationship between also feeling like not enough, there can be this like deep, it's almost like an insecurity, but a deep fear, like, what if I'm too much for people? No, wait, what if I'm not enough for people? And we're actually staying in fear with both of those beliefs. So I like what you're saying about holding two at the same time,
Yeah.
because I think that life is all about kind of holding like beliefs in opposition, you know, where we can hold two things that feel like they don't make sense, but actually life is full of paradoxes that we hold all the time. So yeah, but I think it's about healing this deep fear that says whatever the situation, I am the problem, I'm too much, I'm not enough. And it's starting to be like, what if we could heal all of that? And
Yeah.
what if you knew that you are just fine, and you can look at rooms that aren't for you and not tell a story about what that means about you and your worth, your identity, the whole thing.
Yeah. That there's so much about that that I resonate with. That was actually part of my story exiting corporate, was the wake up call I had, which was, why do I keep feeling like a human punching bag? And it's like my 20 years of corporate, it was just this recycled. And until I stepped back and said, oh, because I am purposely putting myself in cycles of trauma based
Yes.
on what I experienced as a kid. My dad was a narcissistic, human being, like extremely clinically diagnosed as such. And I believed on some level I deserved to get the crap kicked out of me. And so I put
Yeah.
myself in environments that I would get shamed for being
Yeah.
too much. And I would have a level of punishment when I was too transparent, when I was too big of a thinker. These are all things I got told, too passionate. In fact, even
Mm.
in high school, the storm started. I got voted too talkative and too loud, right? Like those were,
Yeah.
which I think those senior superlative things are actually more damaging than good. But anyway, that's another conversation.
Yes.
But I carried that, and I look at now because people still say, Candy, you're too loud. I'm like, great. And you know what? I get paid for that. I get paid for the fact that my voice can project
Yeah.
room. When the sound system goes down, I still can create a projection to share a message. All of that, but that story of unpacking that trauma
Mm.
was one that was challenging. And I'm curious for you personally, was
Yeah.
there a story that you had to unpack in order to be able to then be, because I strongly believe, and I have
Mm.
a little quote I like to say, God gave us our childhood so someday we would step into our purpose. But I do believe that some of our traumas or some of our experiences are
Mm.
those catalyzers or activators. And I'm curious for you personally, what
Mm.
did that path look like? What was that journey for you?
Yeah. So I think, I mean, firstly, for me, you know, I wrote the book once the book actually came out, so it's only kind of 4 or 5 months ago from where we are today, but like it's been such a catalyst for my own understanding. Like, my business for me has been like a real personal growth journey. And there's been visibility and breakthroughs of like these deep trauma narratives that I've carried for my entire life. Some of which have kind of, particularly in the last 4 years, some of which have really started to become present. But I would say for me, even the process of writing the book, it brought new stuff to the surface. And there's just been, I was saying to you before we started recording, I have actually been feeling quite burned out since the book came out. And a big part of that is that it's put me in this really reflective energy where I've just been like, oh my gosh, this relates to me in like such a deeper way than I even realized when I was writing it. And the book is very me. It's very deep to start with. So I think even sort of lifting the lid on too much and starting to talk about it, that has been a catalyst for my own sort of change and growth. And you can just see certain like chapters of my life, and it's like story, 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 story. It's reflected and echoed through so much of my life kind of journey and narrative. But I think particularly when I was a teenager, I very much felt too much for people. And I talk about this in the book that like when I was a young teenager, a lot of my friends went very sort of mainstream, very conventional, liked boy bands, liked all the stuff you're supposed to like. And I just went in a totally different direction. I was like, I like indie music. And I would sit and like doodle kind of band lyrics for hours on end, because the other thing about me is that I've always liked the things that I like way too much. Like I've got no game. I don't play it cool. Like, I've never been a cool kid. I'm not good at pretending that I don't care about stuff because I care about everything. So it's really been that kind of almost that sensitivity. And I'm an Enneagram 4. That's now I know that about myself. I only realized that about 3 years ago. But this kind of feeling that I experience the world in like a deeper way than the average person. And like the feeling that
Beautiful
like,
though.
yeah, like
Beautiful.
these big emotions, that I've always had that used to scare the crap out of me when I was young. Because like I would just feel so sad or like so excited. Like I would just feel everything in such a sort of amplified way. And I think one of the really powerful things that I've been doing in therapy over the last few years is actually the ability to sit with these emotions and enjoy the process. And that's been something I've actually loved. Like this year, I've really started to notice like I'll just feel really pissed off like one day and be like, oh, why am I so annoyed about everything? Like, the way that like the fridge closes is driving me crazy. And yeah, part of that is perimenopause, I suspect. But also it's kind of starting to be like, okay, what does this mean? What is this irritation? And I'm getting to a point where I can nearly always say, there is something that I need to let go of. There is something that I need to stop, to like allow to just like not be in the present, whatever it might be. There's something I need to change. And this irritation is the springboard that is helping me to say, I've got to stop doing it this way. And so, and again, a sadness, it can be like, it's not there to be like, oh, I'm just a sad person. This emotion is being given to me for a reason. There's
Mhm.
something that I need to take action on. And it's been really eye-opening. Instead of like the old narrative I had of like, I'm just too emotional, I am too much, I am too intense for other people. Like, yeah, like maybe there's some truth in that. I do life in a way that some people are like, whoa, I cannot be with that. But like I'm really starting to see the depth of it really for me as a person, and be able to use it to sort of bring my whole self forward into what I want to be more aligned to, rather than staying stuck in a narrative that says you are too much. Does
Yeah.
that make sense?
It makes so much sense. First of all, I feel like you and I are kindred spirits and soul
We
sisters on
so
that
are.
level. There's so many things inside of that. One, I think there are a handful of us, however you want to look at that, that have come into this world. We were old souls to begin with. I was the same way.
100%.
My friends
Yeah.
were out, the boy bands, whatever, and all I wanted to do was go deep into philosophy and like really interesting, like different kinds of music
Mm,
spoke to my soul and cracked me right open and allowed me safe spaces to let some of that emotion go. I've also been told too passionate, too big. I even got told in relationships, you love too big. And I'm like, I don't even know what that
yeah.
is. I wasn't given the capacity to love,
Mm,
which is part of why I have animals in my life, because I know that I can pour that love in big ways,
yeah.
like allow myself to temper it. But I mean, my family made fun of me. I cried at Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer. I'm the only person on the planet that cried at Home Alone. My family thinks this is like hilarious, and I don't understand how people didn't. There's two scenes in particular. I don't know how you don't cry when Kevin
Yeah.
realizes I just want my family for Christmas, and when the grandfather gets to hug his granddaughter for the first time because how do you not feel that? And so that was
Mm,
a huge shame storm for me because it was weird and it was Candy, you're too emotional. Choose. And again, through doing that work, I get to a point where people are like, you're so sensitive. And my response is, thank you for recognizing that. Thank you
yeah.
for
I love
understanding,
that.
because we have a running joke in my family. I call people and I'm like, oh my God, you got to watch this show or watch this movie. It made me cry. And my mom will say, Candy, I'm waiting for the call that you say, you got to watch this. It's the one thing that didn't make me cry. Feel things, but I look at the work that you do. I look at the work that I do. There's a reason we were given that capacity to love
Yeah.
that big. There's a reason we were given a capacity to feel everything. Some of it's been that soul curriculum to learn because for me, and this is where I love Enneagram and human design, because I'm an Enneagram 8, very intense. And that ability to give myself permission to go, oh, I'm wired that way. And
Mm,
there's still a responsibility in knowing I'm wired that way. Because you and I both, in different capacities, have an energy and vibe that's too much sometimes before we even walk in the room. And to
yeah.
know that I'm going to be off putting for some people who are in their shit, who don't want to, I am here to
Mm,
trigger that. I'm here to actually be a catalyst that lights that fire under them so that they can light the fire within. I have to realize though that there's a responsibility that comes with that says, am I in the energy of what serves? I can be in my fullness and I can be in that two-ness, and I can't let that be my excuse that's like, well, you got to suck it up and take it or leave it. This is who I am. In some cases, yes, I do need to be able to say that. But there's this dance that says, where then do I? Because I do feel whether people live, whichever side of the track they live in, living in,
mm,
spinning in, I'm not enough for we play this victim or martyr consciousness. It's like, well, and I'm like, that's not how this works. We have a soul curriculum that says, where am I creating unnecessary high functioning codependency? Where am
yeah.
I attached to outcomes and taking over control because I am that big energy? Like there's spaces that say, if I need to give myself permission to live my life in accordance to how I'm wired, then I have to, because I'd be curious how this has played out for you. But I know with
Mm,
my coaching, I've had to really check my need to want to fix or help other
yes.
people get there. Fuck, like that's like the thing that keeps kicking my ass even this year.
Yeah.
Part of where some of these things are showing up for me, that and the exhaustion sometimes,
Mm,
where do we, because when we are those really big sensitive individuals, there's a really fine line between caring deeply for people and
yes.
carrying in capacities that's not our responsibility. And so I'm curious if you felt that and how does that play out in this work? Because I also think there's something to be said about peeling back the layers, because people look at you and I sometimes I'm like, oh, you guys got your shit together. You figured it out. You've got, and I don't think we figured aspects of it out, but it's, in my opinion, an ongoing peeling back of an onion that every time I think, ooh, I've gotten there, something comes out and kicks me in my ass, and I'm like, and here we go again.
Yeah, 100%. So, yeah, I mean, I think if I'm sure all coaches on some level we go into it because we want to rescue people and we want to fix people and we want to help them. And I think where you're an individual like you, like me, where like life has been painful and like we have this ability to feel deeply and we have felt deeply our own pain, but also like I know for me, because I have this ability to feel other people's feelings, I need to be really disciplined that I am not believing that I'm helping them by feeling their pain for them. And I think that's basically the story of the last 11 years. As I've got more and more self-awareness around that tendency in me, I think I used to believe, when I was in my 20s, I used to believe that I served people most by feeling their pain for them. And so, things that you learn as a coach, like you can't rob the client of their own experience. You can't do that for them. You have to allow them to do that for themselves. You have to allow them to choose not to take that path, even though you can see where it's going and it's going to such a good place. So I think as a coach, we are required to self-manage so closely. That has been very good for me, actually. So kind of the theories about enmeshment, entanglement, drama triangles, that has helped me enormously, personally and professionally, because it's starting to be like, do you know what? I think I used to believe if I have a boundary, if I don't walk that painful path with someone who is really struggling, that's me saying I don't care about you at all, and I'm really not interested. And so I think it's getting a more, I mean, you can hear that almost like that is so unnuanced. So getting a more developed and nuanced understanding of that, to say I can support you very deeply, but I'm not going to carry this for you.
Right. Isn't
That
that
has been
powerful?
Yes, that has been absolutely instrumental. And I would say kind of it's interesting. I'm very cautious about what I want. It's like, dude, I already got a whole history of sad. I don't think I need more. So one of the things, like with my husband, he likes really grungy, like Nirvana music, and particularly Radiohead. And he's like, oh, I love Radiohead. And I'm like, dude, if I listened to this music, I would not get out of bed, because that is almost my frequency. Like I know how to do that. What I need is ska punk. I need happy. I need energetic. I don't need to lie on the floor thinking about the depths of, the world and all the problems with everything. So things like reading the news, I have to be quite disciplined about, because even over the weekend, I read that like some person who was on a TV show that we watched several years ago, it was just a really likable character, was killed in a car accident. And I actually, and it's like, is that reminder of like, what is going on for me in those moments where I'm over invested in someone who I'm not actually connected to. So I think that has been a deep part of the learning, that no, we don't serve people best by feeling their pain for them. No, we don't serve people best by getting over involved in their life circumstances. Actually developing these healthy boundaries and allowing people to have their own experience. I think that's been an absolutely foundational thing for me, because another part of it, I think, is that one of my great desires is to feel seen in the world. And I think that does stem from childhood. And coupled with that, again, it's another all or nothing dichotomy situation, because I have also had a deep, deep fear of being seen. So when I was a teenager, I was actually, I grew up in a place where there was a lot of rock music, and a lot of the teenagers, we all got into bands, and there would be gig nights on a Friday and Saturday, and it was great fun. But like one of the things that I noticed through that is that I had the worst stage fright.
Mm.
And I was a very gifted performer in some ways, but I was not a performer. To this day, I kind of feel like I would rather be a studio musician than I would be like on a stage. Actually, I think now I would carry it a lot more easily, but it was almost like, here's this thing that I want and I feel like I love, but at the same time, I hate it. So it's like, I really want to be seen. I really want to share myself, but I'm terrified to do it. And I think sort of almost reflecting back on that phase of my life, which, and again, it's quite atypical in a lot of ways. I know a lot of towns do have this kind of alternative music scene, and it's not like I was the only person in the world to ever go through it. But like being put on stages at that young age where I had not done any of the work to understand myself, and then being like, I don't have the swagger, because I can't play it cool. I don't have the swagger to be like, I'm totally awesome and nothing ever bothers me. I was more like, these are songs about my pain. But it was so vulnerable that I found myself being torn between like, I really want to be out there and being seen. I also do not want anyone to see the vulnerability that this involves. And it's so interesting, because I think now in my business, having like learned about marketing for like 11 years, I'm like, oh, there's so much about business visibility as a coach. It's not the same, we don't perform as coaches. It's not that. But there's an ability to allow ourselves to be seen in vulnerable ways. I live for raw conversations. Like, when you said at the start, like this is going to be a raw, unfiltered thing, I was like, yes, I'm here for this.
Right, right.
But like, I think it's knowing how to do that in a way which it's not just about self-expression. It's saying what is meaningful for the person who needs our help, rather than it being like a one-way thing of like, this is what I'm putting out in the world. Does that make sense?
It makes total sense. And I think it's so funny because I get people that don't understand when I say one of my biggest fears is networking meetings and karaoke. They're like, Candy, you're on stage all the time. I'm like, yes, I'm a vessel to share a message, but I absolutely hate when the spotlight's on me because that
Yes.
vulnerability piece, and some of this, if you look at in your human design, that defined throat for me, it's so funny
Mm.
because I coach a lot of people with an open throat, obviously, because they're attracted to the fact that I have a way that I speak and show up and I do work stages and I'm very good at working a room and stage and whatever. However, deep down, I wish I could be invisible. Like it's so crazy to me how I wish that I could go to these. People will tell me all the time, I feel your energy before I saw that you were here. And I'm like, oh, I just want to be a wallflower. And again, it goes back to what I was saying. And I think you hit on this so beautifully. There's a responsibility in that. There's a responsibility
Mm.
that regardless of, we all live in this weird, like I said, dichotomy, but what natural energy are you bringing to it? And even if you want the other side, how do you then create? And I love that you were talking about energetic boundaries and sort of that presence and that responsibility. Because one of the things I wanna lean into a little bit, and I'm curious on your take. I have a very strong stance on this, but I'm curious because as we talk about vulnerability, as we talk
Mm.
about too muchness and being able to, and especially for women, to be able to stand in a place where they allow themselves to be fully visible. They allow
Mm.
themselves to be a full expression of who they are. I like to say, we're at a point right now, especially in light of the shit show that is the world, where women in particular need to really learn how to awaken, activate, and amplify their voices. And that is
Yeah.
not something that a lot of women are comfortable with. I don't know. I mean, you and I do this work, and I will say there's days that I'm going, really, that's what we're going to say today? Because I can feel the download that's like, this is the blog, this is the video, this is, and I'm
Yeah.
like, and I've had to struggle with that bigger level of vulnerability that professionally vulnerability I do well, but personally, which is where my actual magic lives,
Mm.
that's not like telling even this week. I mean, you and I were talking about this before the show. I've had an unexpected like chronic illness that showed up that I'm like, I sat there for like 5 minutes going, do I actually share this? And I'm like,
Yeah.
there's something about this because we're not understanding women are exhausted on a chronic level. They're not, there are more things that are happening. And the amount of people that reached out from that thread that were like, Candy, oh my God, I feel seen. This is exactly what I've gone through. I'm like, and once again, there's a reason that vulnerability serves. I'm curious though, when we talk about those energetic boundaries, for me, there's this really interesting energy around nice and kind. And before I share any thoughts about that, am curious how you define them and how are they the same or are they different energies and how do they impact, especially women coming into that full visibility of being able to activate their voice?
Oh, I love that. Yeah. So I was raised by someone who pathologically did not like niceness. And so my kind of baggage around that word is kind of, it always feels like it's a sort of quite an empty thing, like it's a veneer on something which feels more like contempt. But kindness is a really important value to me. And I'd be really interested to know, if you feel the same or if you feel differently, Candy. But I had a conversation with another coach, just casually, socially recently, where we were kind of saying, what's the point of being successful at all if it doesn't give you the right to not behave like a massive ego and just be allowed to be really normal, really nice, really kind. You don't have to. I don't know if you feel the same. I have met people who, it's almost like they've been told in order to be successful you've got to be more angry. Personally, I don't have a problem being angry. I've been a very angry person, like as my kind of like in the years where I think my wounded self was more at the forefront, that
Mhm.
wounded self has been very angry. So for me to get to a point where I don't need to be that, that feels very freeing. But I really do believe that like in a world where it feels like you have to shout the loudest to be taken seriously, I had a really interesting experience several years ago where I was involved with the LinkedIn Creator Program, which was a real privilege to be selected. It was like an application thing. I was one of the people who was selected. One of the things that I gave to them as feedback is like, do you know what? One of the first things that happens in this program is that you open up slots for people to lead expert sessions. The white guys take them all. And then we all spend the whole time being mansplained to about the things that actually, who are these self-ordained experts? Because some of them weren't doing this 5 minutes ago. And so like I think that the pressure of being a woman where like there are so many sharp elbows and you can feel like, what do I just have to play that game? So to me, to have been successful in the way that I have been, I don't feel like I've reached the pinnacle of what I want to achieve in the world yet. But it's really important to me to not have to play the game of sharp elbows and being more masculine, being louder than I feel comfortable being. You know, one of the things that people say to me is like, Jessica, I love your soothing voice. And I've done some like guided meditations. And even when I listen to them, I'm like, that is very soothing. It's almost like I love to lead with that softness.
Mhm.
I kind of, I enjoy being someone who you might overlook. You might not notice that I'm there because I'm not necessarily going to be the one who pushes to the front first or shouts the loudest in the room. But like for the people who are available for that softness, there is such a depth to the work that I do. And so, but I think with all of these things, we also have to keep our own personal growth and our own kind of tendency to want to sabotage, because I've definitely had moments where I've been like, is your kindness, is that just a way of like not playing the game? Is
Mm.
that a way of still hiding and being like, I don't have to do that because my value is kindness? But I think having grown up in a place where it didn't feel like people were very kind, and that felt like a sort of culture that like the more you see it, the more you show up that way yourself, the more that encourages everyone else to do the same. I think for me personally, being kind, not needing to sort of play power games, not needing to be like, I'm the most impressive person here. I'm not thinking about ranking people in the room. I don't care about that. I'm here to do the thing that feels aligned. I don't know. What would your take be on that?
So it's interesting. I love all of what you just shared. I personally think nice is one of the ultimate four-letter words in the English language, and there's a reason. I actually went down a rabbit hole because it's what I do. Because that word really provokes me. It's provoked me my whole life. I've always said, don't ever at my eulogy say that I was a nice person. I will literally come up from wherever I'm at and like take over the situation because the word nice. And I went down this like I said rabbit hole and found out that the actual root word, the etymology for nice means ignorant, foolish, and not knowing. And so when I look at the
Interesting.
energetic dynamic of nice, it's a really
Mm,
low vibration. And I think about the conditioning and programming because I think about the visibility.
mm.
When we talk about nice, we really use that language when it comes to women. My mom even said that the other day. We were talking about something. She's like, you're not being nice. I'm like, damn straight, I'm not. I have absolutely zero. Kind, on the other hand, is one of the highest levels of love we can express. And I'm gonna tap into Brene Brown's work for a minute because she talks about clarity as kind, meaning when I establish very clear boundaries and I let you know, and I always like to use the joke, I'm like, when I tell you that is not safe for me or that is not okay for me, and I ask you repeatedly, I always tell people you get 3 tries with me, figuratively or literally, I'm going to throw a punch afterwards. So that when I tell you stop violating that because that doesn't feel safe or good to me and you continue to do it, and then I throat punch you because you did it, I'm being kind. Because kind said I was very clear about what I need and what's okay for me. And you're choosing to disrespect that. And I think this is really important in the work. When you talk about the too muchness, I do think that this is part of that ability for us to think about, because I think about how many ways, and I love the way that you use the sharp elbows, right? I think about how
Mm.
many times the sharp elbows come at us, and what have we been told? Oh, they were just flirting with you. Oh, they were just being a guy. Oh, I'm like, that's bullshit. That's you telling me I'm supposed to play nice, to let some mansplaining narcissistic. I got to take up space with an ego. And yes, my voice does get loud, but that doesn't mean also, because I love what you just said. And I think there's something, and again, I'm just kind of throwing this in the space because I want to see how this, what you think about this, especially in light of what you do. Because like I said, I love the work that you do. It's this space of how many ways do we also then tell women softness looks like this? Because I get kind of annoyed when people are like, Candy, you need to be more feminine. I'm like, you don't get to tell me what feminine looks like.
Mm,
You don't get to tell me because I also am a person. I'm on the other side where you say sometimes people may dismiss you because your voice is so soothing and you're softer. Where I get told, Candy, you need to bring your volume down or your voice. If I get one more person tells me I need to tone down. No, I'm speaking up because I'm going to be made sure. Because
mm,
to your point, that anger or that rage that I think a lot of women have suppressed actually can be a huge source for catalytic creativity when channeled in a way to align it to how you're here to use your voice. Some of
yeah.
us are here. I am here to get loud. I have a lot of energy that's like, look, I am going to push things, yet there is still a femininity in what I do that my softness and your softness look very different. And so
Yeah.
when I look at for me, and I'm just curious, and I'm kind of going down one of my rabbit holes. When I look at the energy of nice versus the energy of kind, kind says I choose to love and be kind to myself first. And therefore, I'm going to be very clear to create the energetic boundaries that allow me to be in the full expression of what I need to be and be. Because I think empathy isn't, there's a difference between empathy and sympathy, right? Sympathy is
Yeah.
carrying everyone. Empathy says, okay, I see you and I hear you, and I'm still going to hold you accountable to your shit. Like, you don't get to do that just because you're like, oh, well, I was being like, I feel like we have a lot of cop out that lives in
Yeah.
that energy. And so I'm just curious your thoughts on that.
Yeah, well, I think that empathy can actually be deeply powerful. And it's almost like what you're describing. It's like this passivity of like, it wasn't my fault, allowing other people to not take responsibility for the things that they are putting out in the world. And again, that's been a big learning for me. Yes, I've been a very over responsible person. I have, and that's been part of like my conditioning. I think actually most women are conditioned to be that way when we're girls.
Mhm.
Um, and part of that narrative and this whole thing about kind of masculine, feminine, I think we all have both
Mhm.
within us. And as I'm saying all of this, Candy, I'm so aware that you probably know more about me than I do because you've seen my full human design, and we did like an interpretation session, didn't we, a while ago. But I've always found that I am someone who often has more to talk about with men than with women, which is weird because I spend like 99% of my life exclusively with women.
Yeah.
If you were to look at my Instagram, you wouldn't know that men existed because there are no men on there. And it's the way the algorithm has interpreted my feed, I honestly think. It's not even particularly by design, but I think I've often been quicker to um, sort of come in and tell people what I think about stuff. So that's probably like this truth telling thing is a big thing for me. That's got me in a lot of trouble throughout most seasons of my life because it makes people very uncomfortable. um so I think that as a woman who speaks openly and truthfully, I cannot tell you the number of times there's been an awkward moment because I have expressed a preference on something, even from like being asked once, like, would you like butter or mayo on these potatoes? And I spoke first because I didn't think it was a thing, and I upset someone in the room because they felt I was being too dominant about what kind of potatoes we should all be having. And it's like, oh really? As if,
Like, okay.
okay then. But like honestly, that has been a big part of my wiring. And I think going back to what you said earlier in our conversation, these things that get us in trouble, they're often the things that make us best as coaches and consultants, because the ability to look at something and be like, it's not working because of this, and you need to stop doing that. That is a really good skill as a coach. That is not a useful skill in a corporate workplace, I often found, because the thing that they said to me over and over again is like, you can't say that. It's very sensitive. that's not something that we can do anything about. And for me, it was like, oh my gosh, my hair is standing on end because I cannot be with bullshit.
Yeah.
And I cannot be with this thing of like, let's all pretend that it's not happening when it's clear to everyone that it's happening. But from memory, Candy, when you did my human design, I think you said to me that I had very strong masculine and very strong feminine energy. Like they were almost like in parallel. And I do think that all of us have that within us. And I think that as we're growing up, it's really interesting sort of observing the things that used to get said to girls when we were growing up compared to what is said these days. I think there's been some improvement. I have sons, not daughters. So, to a certain extent, I probably do have some gaps in my knowledge of what is current. But like I feel like we were always taught to be subservient, to be quiet, to not have opinions, which for me is like really uncomfortable because I am a walking opinion about everything. So it's kind of, it's this giant balance that we have to decide. And I know that I've had seasons in my life where I was very passive and I was really trying hard to play the game of like, let's not upset people. For kind of 15 years, I was a pastor's wife in a church. And that was something that I was trying incredibly hard all the time to not upset people by being too me. And I have to say that, like, now that we are out of that way of life, which is a complicated story, but I'm not divorced, I'm still married. It's just we're not in ministry anymore. It's been actually quite liberating being like, do you know what? Like, I now see the parts of myself that were not allowed to exist.
Yeah.
And now I get to have opinions again. And it's awesome. So I think, like, for me, there's like a fulfillment piece.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes we will decide consciously, I want to be less this in order to make this dynamic work. I don't believe that's always a really unhealthy thing. I think sometimes like we can bring ourselves into balance based on the dynamic with the people and the rooms that we're in. But at the same time, I think if we're constantly suppressing and not allowing ourselves to be authentic, I think it becomes a problem. And I think it shows up in physical chronic health.
100%. And I think to go back to a term you use, there's a big difference between passivity, which means I don't take responsibility. I'm just giving up. I'm just going to allow it to be what it is. And I'm going to shut myself down and play small, which is passivity is nothing but victim consciousness versus making conscientious choices that say, in this room right now, my two-ness doesn't need to be on full because A, I may not be in the right environment where people are going to receive it.
Yeah.
I don't really have the energy to dissect this or be in this space. I don't have a fight. I don't have a dog in the fight, so to
Yeah.
speak. But when we consciously choose, because I do think there are times where I have made the choice, even though I can very clearly see what's going on. I'm like, nope, not my dog, not my fight. I don't,
Yeah.
this isn't where I'm gonna just bite my tongue and just let it be, or I'm gonna excuse myself and leave the energy and let it play out however it needs to. I don't need to fix this. I don't need to
Yeah.
carry this. And I think about that opportunity of when we choose to stand in our own sovereignty and stand in our space, we can consciously make those choices because while I will say, again, going back to Brene Brown for a minute, there's a difference between belonging and acceptance. And I know even in talking to my clients, sometimes I'm like getting to the root of the matter when it's like, what are you afraid of? They
Mm.
finally go, what if I have no one to talk to? And I think, I say this sometimes when I speak and people laugh, but there's a real fear that if I truly stand in the full expression of me, I know looking at my chart, it is one
Yeah.
of the things that holds me back. The more I stand in the fullness of me, the smaller
Mm.
my circle gets, because the more I accept the fact that everything in my chart is here to disrupt leadership and power. How is
Mm.
it a safe game to play in an environment where people don't want to talk about those things, right?
Yeah.
I even have a friend group that I'm invited to something coming up that I'm like, do I want to consciously choose to just be there?
Mm.
And I already know I'm like, no, I actually can't do that. And so I have to be okay going, then I need to decline. Because for me to go and painfully be in when I know the conversation's going to be in that energy
Yeah.
of, oh,
Yes.
it's not, I don't want to, especially for someone who's been fighting with something that's chronic right now, add another layer. So, but
Yeah.
it's a conscious choice that says, I have no disrespect or dishonor for those individuals. I love them deeply. And I'm going to choose to not be in that energy because I don't want to play the game. that day. I don't
Yeah.
have it in me right now. And I think that's part of the journey of knowing to use your line, too much, how to thrive being more instead of settling for less. I don't think it's just jumping into the pool going, okay, fuck it. I'm just going to be too much. It's
Yeah.
discernment, right? I think the responsibility comes with discernment that says the more I
Yes.
evolve, the more choices I make to decide, am I doing this just to gain acceptance, to keep the peace, and I'm okay with that? Or I'm going to be a bit of a lone wolf standing out there because I'm going to honor that that's my soul contract and that's what I need to do. And I think there's that.
Yeah, like adaptability
Yeah.
of like sometimes it might be a hill to die on and sometimes it won't be. And something that I really noticed in myself kind of during the pandemic, which, you know, like for all of us, is like trauma layered upon trauma. It was like even now you look back and you're like, we weren't allowed to leave our houses. I can't even imagine that. Like, yes, it happened, but like what? But something I really noticed in the pandemic was how much my body let out this exhale of like, oh my God, we're not doing all this like stuff that you don't want to do. And I think it's been really striking to me, sort of rebuilding life the other side of just being like, do you know what? I used to put myself under a lot of pressure to be a certain way, to be sociable, to be more outgoing than I probably naturally am. Because I am actually I'm an ambivert. I'm very comfortable being an extrovert in certain circumstances, but I also can be very introverted. And I've felt for a long time that actually my introversion is more a trauma response than it's like an authentic expression of who I am. But I do have that depth. I love my own company. I love this conversation because it's like being inside my own head and the depths that we're going to. It's like, yes. But like, I've really noticed like the things that I used to do because I felt I should. And
Mhm.
actually the freedom that comes from just being like, do you know what? I don't want to go to that thing. I don't want to. And that was something that I used to deny myself before. And I've definitely been in a season where it's felt magical these last kind of 4 years, 5 years, to just not say yes to things that my body is saying no to. That was actually quite a new and eye-opening experience. And you kind of get that thing of like, oh, look, I did what I felt like doing, which in a previous life I would have considered as selfish. And
Mhm.
yet I didn't die, and neither did anyone else. This is a path. Did you know that?
Well, and I love that. And I think honestly, that's again where you can stay in victim consciousness or look at the fact that we were given a gift. The pandemic catalyzed the shift of consciousness that's happening. And it was
Yeah.
opening to really settle into that energy of discernment that says, do I want to keep being on a treadmill that's going nowhere, just running faster and harder? And like that's what we
Yeah.
culture, whether you're in the Western hemisphere or the Eastern hemisphere, like our entire world has this notion that the harder I push, the more that I do, it's my metric of success when it's like we're killing
Mm.
ourselves literally and figuratively. And so I look at the pandemic was one of the greatest, again, looking back on, wow, we were grounded for how long and couldn't go out and do that. Like it's so weird looking at it in hindsight. And at the same time, there's things that forever changed.
Yeah.
For me, I used to say, would tell people I was so much more of an extrovert and that, and it was interesting because a friend of mine, again, those that know you closest, she's like, Candy, I would have told you all day long you're an introvert. I'm like, what are you talking about? I'm loud. I got a big personality. And she's like, but what do you do when you recharge? She goes, there's like three things. Your face is in a book, you're on a trail, or you're like dark, like your phone's like, no one can touch you. And I'm like, true, true. And I found some peace in honoring how much of an introvert I am because there has always been a label. And I love the way Simon Sinek says it just because I have a big personality doesn't mean I'm not introverted. I can
Yeah.
be really lit up. And when people are like, yeah, but you're on stage, again, there's separation when I'm on stage. I'm not actually like I'm engaging, but I'm not engaging because for me, my energy is here.
Yeah.
And so I love that ability to take that lens and say, ooh, I get you because again, it changes the way we get to decide, right? And it allows
Yeah.
us that ability to say, oh, I can say no, because I think one of the biggest ways we get to step into the aligned version of too much that you talk about is to say yes and no without explanation, apologies, or justifications.
Yeah. And I think often the people we need to make those, or we want to make those explanations to the most, are ourselves,
Yeah.
because I know that there's been certain things, like not pushing myself into social things that I don't actually want to do, because like you were saying before, it means that you're going to have to dumb yourself down. You can't talk about the things you really like. You have to talk about the stuff that other people are doing. I don't live in a place where there are a lot of people like me. There aren't a lot of entrepreneurs. So I have to do normal conversation, and that can be very pleasant, but it's not recharging to me. But I do think that, like, what I've noticed in these areas where I'm giving myself permission to set up boundaries that I've never had before, in all kinds of ways, you just think that wasn't an outrageous thing.
Mm.
I've lived a lot of my life believing that I was not allowed to do that. And when you suddenly think, I was allowed to do it the whole time, so why did I wait this long?
Right.
It's that kind of, it's that piece that we have to make with ourselves. And I think we are all kind of in this like journey of self-improvement, personal growth. It doesn't need to be sort of measured in attainment or high achievement, but like I think that we're always moving forward. And I've just found that there is like layer after layer after layer. And like what you shared before, I feel like you never really get to a point where you're like, yeah, I've totally nailed this, because then you notice this other area of your life and you're like, wow, that was a huge blind spot. How did we not see that? But I think that the things that we're meant to release and process and heal, they come up as we're ready to receive them.
Yeah, I believe life does that. And even that's one of the things I love about human design. It meets you where you're at. And there's a freedom in allowing yourself to just be in flow with that. And so, oh my God, we could talk all day.
We
And I
really
absolutely
could.
love, love, love this conversation. That being said, we're going to rein it in. And how can people get in touch with you? How do they find you? Where are you showing up? And how do they get access to your book? And then I have one last question for you to close things out.
Yeah, so my website is jessicafearnley.com. I'm sure that Candy will be putting the link to that
All the
in the
stuff will
show
be
notes.
for sure.
But yeah, you can access all of my stuff on there. There's links to my book, my podcast, my blog, all of my social channels are on the website, but I'm sure that Candy will share those as well. I'm very active on LinkedIn. I've had a really good relationship with LinkedIn for a long time. So come and connect with me on there. I've also newly set up on Instagram. So come and find me on Instagram as well. I'm having a lot of fun doing reels and stuff like that. But yeah, you can buy my book from Amazon if you search for Too Much Jessica Fearnley. And some people love to be like, I wrote Too Much Jessica Fearnley, which, is becoming a very funny joke. Too Much Jessica Fearnley. But if you put that into Amazon, then it's available globally. So whichever country you're listening from, you
I love,
can
and you
get
can
it
see it
from there.
behind her.
It
Please,
is.
please, please get a copy of her book, Too Much, How to Thrive, Being More Instead of Settling for Less. And Jessica, I want to say thank you for being on the show. And if you had one last thing you want to leave our audience with today after this conversation, what would that be?
I mean, I think for me, as you've probably gathered from our conversation, too much is such a personal thing. It has been like almost like if you were to put a banner over my life and be like, what is the theme of this? It's feeling like too much. I know that there's so many women and men out there who feel the same. So I would say, like, one of the central themes of the book is like, actually, if you feel like too much, you are not the problem. You are likely putting yourself in places which perpetuate this limiting narrative that you have about who you are and why you're in the world. So the whole purpose of everything, I believe, is go and find your version of more. If you're too much, it means that you're made for more. It means that where you are is not enough. You don't need to stay in not enough. You don't need to fight it. You need to let it turn into like an autoimmune condition or something awful like that. You are free to go and find the thing which is going to fulfill you. I believe that that is the purpose of life for all of us on this planet. So yeah, go and find the thing that makes your too much feel like just the right amount. I think that that is a real destination that all of us are able to get to.
I love that so much. If you feel like you're too much, go find the spaces where you get to be more.
Yes,
So, so, so beautiful. Thank you so much for being on the show today. I absolutely love this conversation. I hope you will come back. Like I said, we could do this all day long.
I would love to.
So thank you for being here. And
Thank you for having me.
For all of you tuning in, thank you for joining us in this conversation. As I said, these are our opportunities to get raw, real, and gritty and have the conversations that matter. Please make sure you subscribe, leave us a review. It allows more people to tap into these conversations. With that, everybody, we will catch you on the next episode. Mwah. See y'all later.